Yeah, I've been in software development my whole career. I started out as a developer many decades ago, and then kind of moved my way, up the ranks, but always in the area of delivering products somewhere. Did a lot of work on the enterprise side, working in telecom and working with financial systems and financial companies. But in 2017, I was working on some enterprise projects, and a colleague of mine came to me and showed me Bitcoin and said, "Look at this! Look at the architecture on this thing. This thing is crazy." So we started, digging into it. He built a miner. He was mining some Bitcoin at that time, under his desk, on a computer under his desk. It was, that back then you could actually, that might even been late 16, and it's probably making like $38 a day or something in Bitcoin. It's very exciting. Anyway, so we looked at that architecture, and we realized that this distributed architecture required, no maintenance, no DevOps. And it had been up and running at that point for several years, never went down, zero downtime, which was in the enterprise, you never had zero. You would strive for, 99% was the gold standard, but Bitcoin was, the blockchain was 100%, and still is to this day. It's never gone down. So that whole architecture was just fascinating. Forget it even about the crypto side of it. And then we started looking at why is this staying up? And it's because the economic incentives were too strong to let anybody attack it. So it wasn't a matter of hiding it behind a firewall anymore, because no firewall is impenetrable. If you're a target, you're going to get cracked, right? So this Bitcoin thing used economics to keep people from trying to attack or corrupt it. So that part of it was really super interesting. So I did a lot of work doing consulting work, educating enterprise organizations about blockchain and what was coming. And some of them were interested. Other ones were just, okay, that's nice, but don't ever talk to people about this again. Go away, because they realized it was probably going to be disruptive to their business model. We had some discussions in the telecom space, and just with portability, number portability, the way they were doing it, blockchains were ideal, suited for that. But then they realized they don't need us anymore if this blockchain is managing number portability. So so a lot of that was, a lot of it was fun educating people about it, but and we were trying to do some consulting. We had picked up a couple of consulting gigs to build out concepts, but it was at some point we just wanted to start building. So then I started building products a couple years after that, probably 2019, just pre-COVID, and we started building, and we had built and launched a couple of products around some of it was around the gambling space, because that was really what was hot on the market. So we kind of latched on to this lottery concept, right? So people go into this pool, and out of this it's like a lottery ticket. One of you 100 people are going to win the lottery. So we built systems that did that, which was kind of interesting, but led into what we're working on today. Was once you get people in that pool and they're staking their assets into that pool, now we can take those assets and we can harness those assets and do some amazing things. So we built a product that we launched in Guatemala that was used as a micropayment system for people doing digital marketing. So guys who are going online and reviewing products, or hitting or liking or disliking certain links. There's a whole workforce that was doing that. They were trying to use traditional fiat to pay these guys, but these guys were earning like $5 a week. So we solved that problem using crypto for the payment, and also using staking mechanisms to keep the product from getting corrupted, and then plugging that stake into a yield producer, so that the people who were doing the digital marketing, they got their $5 payment, right? We also built a little bank for them so they can keep their payment in a system, because a lot of these guys were unbanked. They didn't know the concept of the bank. And what we used as stickiness in that banking system was the reward system, right? If you do your work and you do what we're asking of you, that's you're going to get paid, but you also have the opportunity to get a reward. So what this did, it kept people interested and excited to actually participate in the digital marketing, even if they weren't really, it became almost like they weren't there for the digital marketing anymore. They were there for the rewards that the system could provide them.
And what was the reward? What do you mean by a reward?
And great question. Crypto is super interesting because you create cryptocurrency. So you create something that is a value. And what we did with those guys, because they needed to buy bread and milk and stuff, we made sure that the crypto was linked to a stable token. Get rewards in the form of a stable coin, and they could take that to there was a bank in Guatemala that we had an arrangement with that would off-ramp if they wanted to off-ramp their crypto for local currency. So back in the day, that was really, you had to, it was a crypto kind of represented some sort of like a fiat currency. So you had to draw that line. It's evolved significantly since then. We've got this concept of RWA, which is a real world asset. So now there's cryptocurrencies that can be matched to something in the real world. In the simplest form, it can be, think of it like a coupon, right? You take your crypto, you can redeem it for a coupon. In the more sophisticated financial terms, it represents a financial instrument. You've got RWAs that represent T-bills now. So now I can move T-bills around blockchains quickly, and there's an off-ramp for a real-world stable asset, right? And T-bills are fairly stable, right? So there's people that handle all of the custodianship of that off-ramping, so which makes it really easy to use that in the crypto space. I'm doing another example of rewards. I'm doing right now. My son is a clothing designer, so he is going to, for the project internally, for a little promotion for my project, which is BenniFy is the platform I'm working on. He's designing hoodies, right? So we're opening up pools, and people will enter these pools, stake their asset into the pools. It's going to earn some yield, but as a reward, we're going to give an RWA token where they can redeem. We've got a shopping cart redemption system where they can redeem that token for one of these designer hoodies. So what does that do? We're doing it more not to give away the hoodies and not to generate a lot of revenue, but we want to prove the concept. I want to show other people how you can use pooling as a marketing mechanism, right? So it's more of a demonstration than anything else. We'll do once we open the pools, my son's organization will post it on their social media. It'll get 1 million views, and we'll see, we'll probably close the pool out in a couple hours because people will want these hoodies, but it'll kind of demonstrate the hype that can be harnessed through this concept of pooling. And let me give you that. So high level on pooling, in this pooling concept, you stake your asset, the asset's invested, the yield is used as the investment vehicle. The principal, the original staking is the principal, always goes back to the staker. So it is it's not risk. It's a less risky way to invest or to participate or to fund an activity, a project, a charity, whatever it is, a farm in Thailand, whatever it is you're trying to fund, it's a less risky way to do it, because our goal is to never risk the original investment of the people who are entering the pools.
Question on that. People stake their assets.
Yeah.
Where does the yield come from?
Good. That's a great question. It can come from a lot of different places. So staking, how familiar are you with cryptocurrency and blockchains?
Assume I don't know anything.
Perfect. Okay. So in the old world, in the Bitcoin world, we had this thing called proof of work, right?
Yeah.
So you had to solve a very complex algorithm. If you solved that algorithm before everybody else who solved the algorithm and it was validated, you earned something. So you basically invested with your computing power. And that was one of the speed bumps in attacking the system, is you needed a lot of computing power. It cost a lot to do this computing power, right? And that was awesome, but you heard a lot of hype about, oh my God, it's eating up all, the energy it takes. And it's true. I mean, you had data centers that were just, burning up with computational power. Literally, I mean, the heat that it would generate was outstanding. So whole data centers dedicated to this, and there was, it wasn't viable. It didn't scale. So then they came up with this thing called a proof of stake instead of proof of work, so POS, right? So proof of stake was more of a financial investment instead of a computing investment. So in order to secure the network, you would stake to that network, and that stake would be, and because you stake to that network, you would be paid interest on that stake. So
paid by who?
Paid by the chain that you were securing. So if I am going to secure, let's say Ethereum is now proof of stake, I can stake Ethereum, and if an Ethereum will give me interest back. So for every ETH I stake, I get ETH plus back.
But where does Ethereum get that money to pay the premium?
Right, same place where the Fed gets it. Right, so the Ethereum makes ETH. That's the token that runs their network. They mint it, right, and they mint a certain amount of it, and the usage, the demand, and the scarcity of that ETH drive the value of the ETH, just like it does in the US dollar, right? So, or any other let's say any other commodity, gold, right? So if there's more of it's being used and it's harder to get, people will pay more for it. That's why if you go on to exchanges, you'll see the value of ETH, kind of doing this, right? So it's
you see it do this, right? You see big value swings in.
Look, if I look like that, yeah. But if you do look out over a year or even 2 years, and it's astounding, the growth. It's very frustrating for investors when they look at like very short term, because it is extremely volatile short term. But if you look longer term, it's not volatile. It's actually quite strong.
Okay.
So the yield comes back from the chain that you're trying to protect, and then you've got off ramps to turn that back into fiat if you choose, or you hold it and play the long game and use it as a long-term investment. So that's
this is all predicated on the value of Ethereum goes up over time.
Yes, well, that's kind of like any investment's predicated on that, right? That it's the value of what I'm doing is going to go up over time. But
I mean, for some investments that's not true, right? Enron.
Yeah.
If you invested in Enron, yeah, it went up, but it also came down.
Sure. I've got a wallet more coins that have done that as well on the altcoin market. Yeah. It's as risky as any other startup. If you do it right and there's value to it and people want to use this, the value, then the token value goes up. So if the more people that use Ethereum and find value in it and are building on it, the long-term value of that becomes stronger and stronger. The interesting about Bitcoin going, because that's kind of the standard right now, and when you're looking at countries using that as a reserve currency, Bitcoin doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. I mean, it's a store of value, but there's not a lot of functionality there. I mean, you can kind of build on it, but not really. It's really slow, so I can't buy a loaf of bread with it. But the model is so simple and so clean that people can recognize the supply and demand aspect of it. There's only 21 million tokens. That's it, no more, no less. There's, so nobody's going to come in and dump a bunch of or mint new tokens and devalue the thing, right? So and it's all done through computer algorithm, computer program that is visible to everybody. So there's no secret box back there with guys pulling levers. You know exactly what this thing is going to do, which makes it extremely predictable, which makes it a great store of value. So that's why countries now are clamoring to try to back up some of the reserves using Bitcoin, or MicroStrategy for that point. It's his whole, Saylor's whole business model. Well, not the whole business model, but his investment model is based on it. Yeah, it's you want to make sure that if you're buying a coin, that the value is going to go up. Now, what we're working on in BenniFi and VeriPura, what we're working on is tokenization that is a utility token. So think of it like almost like a subscription, but it's in the form of a token, right? So you have a certain number of access tokens, utility tokens, that unlock all these features, and that drives the demand. If you deliver on the features, that demand is going to go up. So it's almost like getting tickets to a carnival ride. You get your tickets at the booth, and then you come into the ride and you ride the whirlybird, or you ride the the whatever, and hand out your tickets within the ecosystem. And when you want to ride more rides, you go get more tickets, or you go to the game alley and you earn more. I knock down some tin cans, and all of a sudden now I've got more tickets, and now I can ride more rides, and it becomes this locked in cycle where people are interacting within the system, and it creates its own economy. So that's the, from a token economic standpoint, that's the kind of dynamic you want to build. You want to make sure you have this earn and spend dynamic going back and forth, so your communities always spending and earning tokens. Now, I guess the original question on the yield. So the yield comes from the chain. There are multiple chains that are proof of stake that allow you to stake to them. Some of them have great yield. Some of them have less than great yield. It is sometimes volatile. If a chain is just starting out, they usually pay very high yield. But the risk is I don't know what the future value of that's going to be. If I'm staking to Ethereum, even though it's kind of doing this, I know in the long run that yield is worth something. But in the short term, it is still volatile. Now you step into real world assets, and it's the same concept now, where I can actually, instead of staking to a chain, I can use these RWA tokens and basically stake or invest them, and they'll earn a modest yield. But I'm not worried about the RWA doing a short-term volatile swing. So depending on what your use case is, sometimes the volatility is good, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes in Guatemala, I didn't want my token to be, if I didn't want, even though I'm protecting their principal, I didn't want their principal to be bouncing up and down, because these guys needed this to live on, right? So that's why in that case, went to an RWA. The only RWA we had was USDT, which was a US dollar token, right? So so
in your example, the RWA is VeriPura.
No,
ownership stake in VeriPura?
No, eventually VeriPura could become a yield producer, but in my example, an RWA would be a more established environment, like a stock, a bond, or a proof of stake blockchain.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be a an ownership portion of VeriPura.
Okay,
You're staking your Ethereum, and for that you're getting some narrow slice of the company.
Right. So I'll jump into the high level token economics for VeriPura. All right. So we talked about a utility token first, right? So VeriPura is going to have a lot of features that people are going to want to get access to, right? So they're going to want to be part of that community. So they're going to need tokens to be part of that community. They're going to want to unlock features. So they're going to need tokens to unlock those features. And since we're creating VeriPura, and we're going to use the same model of a limited supply, a fixed number of tokens, so that we don't, there's no fear of us introducing any kind of inflation or deflation rather. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is the security of VeriPura. We have certain things we want our community to do and certain things we don't want them to do, right? So how do you do that? How do you control that? Through economics, right? So we can use internally in VeriPura, we can use proof of stake. So you get your VeriPura tokens, which have a value, right? Mapped back to fiat, because you've got to get them somewhere. You stake those tokens. If you do what you're supposed to do, that stake is protected. If you violate that, you can lose that stake, right? So if you're not following the rules that are programmatic, that are in the system can pull that stake back or hold that stake. So you don't want to risk your stake at all. So that's how we can control activity, and then we can also control it through if there's actions that people are doing in the system, we can create a rewards mechanism to make sure that people, even without staking, if you're performing the actions that we need to do, like in this case, let's say you're certifying that this produce line is chemical free or ethically raised. So you've got these validators who can look at the process and go, I checked it out, did an inspection. These guys are clean. They're going to get rewarded for that in VeriPura tokens, right? Now, that creates a little bit of a incentive and motivation for people in the community to do these jobs, rather than just having to go out and hire people or recruit people to do it. If we do this right, there should be validators, and there's lots of different things people can validate in a system. But validators should be lining up because it's a source of income. It becomes a job for them, right? It becomes a way for them to do something. On the other side of it, to protect us from getting botted, any activity that you want to do in VeriPura should cost you some VeriPura tokens, some Veri tokens, right? So that you don't get because bots are just malicious. If you say, okay, I'm gonna open this up and let people post pictures here, some bot's gonna come in there and do a DOS attack on you. They're gonna hit you with 100 million uploads, right? So we don't want that. Right, so you have economic disincentives to prevent yourself from getting botted. So every little thing you do, you always have a little bit of an economic exchange, a little bit of a charge to do something. So you're going to have to pay a portion of a Veri token in order to do that activity, okay. And that keeps the bots from it. And the bots are like, all right, I'm not doing that. And if the bots do it, it's fine. They're using Veri tokens to do it. So VeriPura, actually benefits if the bot decides to come in and do that, even though and the bot gets nothing out of it, and VeriPura is getting richer because they have to buy Veri tokens to do these activities.
Right. So how does BenniFy fit into this? So
BenniFy, we're going to use BenniFy just for fundraising. So BenniFy is a fundraising mechanism. So BenniFy is our platform. We have built a utility on top of it called Pledge Pool. Pledge Pool is a replacement for GoFundMe. So instead of giving somebody $100 for a project, you're staking and you're giving them that yield. So we'll set up pools, and Tom and Ono will run the pools. They'll define the pools. They can be, different flavors, different yield sources, just to see what is going to work with the community that's going to be investing. We've got some good crypto yield, 18% as of today, that we can tap into, which lets us tap into the crypto community who already hold those tokens. And then we can start creating pools for real world assets as well to get the more conservative investors. But the idea is to set up these pools and get some funding going and break them down in a way that can be consumed by investors who would normally go to like a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe. Problem with Kickstarter and GoFundMe, you don't get your principal back. In this case, you get your principal back.
You get your principal back, and what else?
And what else? That's a good point. So the system is set up to also give secondary distribution. So you've got a yield distribution that can go to the beneficiary. The yield can also be broken up, and part of that can be given back to the participant, to the person who's who's staking to the pool. And then you can have reward tokens as well. And the reward tokens, and I kind of gave that example with the hoodies. In my case, I'm going to do a RWA as a reward token as an incentive to join the pool. In VeriPura's case, it's a way to distribute the very token, right? So you come in, you go into the pledge pool, you stake. The yield goes to VeriPura. VeriPura is going to give you some very tokens back in return. So now you've just invested in VeriPura because you hold Veri tokens. And
so who do you think is doing that? Is that the customers, the users of the system?
Could be the users. It could be the holders. It could be hodlers. Somebody somebody who read the white paper and said, "This is a great idea. I want some of these Veri tokens. They are going to go up in value. They're worth 3 cents today. I bet you these things are going to be worth 10 cents in a year." So it can also be an investor's tool. But unlike Kickstarter, instead of getting a handshake back, you're getting a piece of the company. These tokens, and you asked this before, and I didn't answer the question, but the tokens represent the ownership of the company, because the company is directed by what's called a DAO. Eventually, is directed by a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization that uses voting, and you get to vote if you are a token holder. So the more tokens you have, the stronger your vote. So everybody. And as the value, and this is a beautiful part of it, unlike Facebook or any other large social environment, everybody who participates and gets a token back has a value of that company. So on Facebook, if you make a post, you don't get $1 back for that post, right? So in VeriPura, if you participate or actually any crypto project, you participate in that project and you get one of their tokens, as that value increases, your value increases because you hold those tokens. So there's a motivation to be part of that community, not just in the governance of it, but also in the value, in the overall value of it. So it's a way to instantly become an investor and be able to get rewarded if this project takes off. So people are motivated. What's good for VeriPura is good for everybody in the system, every user of the system. Way down to the lowly, not lowly, but down to the to the small farmer, to the co-op, to the buyer, right? Anything that's good for the system is good for everybody in that system.
Okay. In terms of BenniFy, is that up and running today?
So
I've seen the website, but I don't know sort of what's going on in the background in terms of people staking to it, and sort of what the flow is there and what the size of that looks like if you were to use it to, I assume that would be a funding mechanism for VeriPura.
That's going to be a funding mechanism for VeriPura. Yeah, a funding and a token distribution mechanism. So instead of doing an airdrop of their tokens, they can do it through pools. And they can configure the pools to, you can actually even have pools that don't require staking. All it does is it distributes a reward. But what you're doing is you're collecting interest, you're collecting registering accounts, right?
Yep.
So is it up and running? Yes, it's on the mainnet. BenniFi for a startup, it is a long project, and it's super feature rich. Unfortunately, we probably should have put the brakes on features, but we couldn't. It was a financial product, and the more we built, the more we realized this would be more valuable if we could, and we kept layering and layering and layering. We got some initial funding. We had some partners who were digital marketing partners, and they kind of helped us to drive the scope of what was needed. And they're actually still actively involved with us, which is great because I'm not a marketing guy. So these guys get eyeballs on this stuff. So we have pools up and running that are supporting our project. And they're very small pools, but it's more just to show how the yield, how you would set a pool up and how the yield works. That's on the mainnet. And then we've got the marketing teams are running their pools, but most of the pools that they're doing are less stake and more reward because they're trying to drive engagement. We've got a large project in South America that's getting ready to launch pools using the yield from EOS, which is a blockchain, and that pays, I say, 17-18% at this point. That fluctuates a little bit, that yield value, but that's a pretty high yield. And they are building out solar farms down in Colombia, where they're basically selling tokenizing and selling solar panels in these solar farms. That works pretty well for them because they have a token. So they're using our pools to raise money, and in turn for people participating in these very controlled pools, they get a portion of these PWAT tokens back as part of the reward. So it's a way to engage with investors at a micro level. So instead of going the traditional route and knocking on doors and trying to find an angel investor who's going to drop chunks of 25K or whatever your minimum is, you can expose these pools to a lot more people and do it at a smaller amounts, but at a larger scale. And at the end of the day, you're still raising your $1 million to launch your project. So,
and how do you know there are really solar panels in Colombia?
How do you know? Oh, wow. For that project, that's a good question. That's really on the beneficiary to make sure that they prove that. So one of the things in our pools, you've got to, you provide links to your project team, your white papers. So you expose all of that to the person who might be entering your pools, because it's up to the beneficiary to try to convince people to enter their pools. And you do that the same way you would convince a regular investor. You got an explainer video, you got a white paper, you got a team. But the nice thing is you don't, because you don't lose your principal, you reduce the risk. So now people perusing these projects can go, I love that project. Don't know these guys personally, but sounds like a great project. What the heck? I'm not going to lose my money anyway. I'll park it there. So it's the classic VC model of I'll park it in 10, in the VC model, you park it in 10 different places and maybe one of them will hit, right? So, and if the one hits, now you've lost all your other principles gone, but that one hit should make up for it. In this model, it's reusable, right? So if I'm staking here and this one doesn't work, that's fine. I'll just stake it over here next time, right? So now I've got
sorry, John. So the risk really is the fluctuation in the value of what you're staking, right, in the external market.
Yeah,
that's the primary risk.
Right. That's why it's also the premium, right? You're foregoing the premium as long as you're staked. And so, the coin's going like this and you're flatlining. Well,
or it's going like the other way, right? And you're flatlining. You're getting whatever the token is, right? The cryptocurrency, whatever the digital asset back.
Right. We don't
You know,
we don't give the dollar value back, Jack. We give
Right,
the
correct.
quality back. So if you stake one Bitcoin, you get one Bitcoin back. I don't care what the
Right.
value of the Bitcoin is. So you're still riding the wave of that value growth. What you're giving up is the interest that thing is making while it's working. Right. So it's you're giving up, the potential earnings if you just deposited that somewhere yourself. But what you're getting in return for not risking that principal is you're getting an investment in VeriPura in the form of Veri tokens. But in our platform, the distribution of that yield is kind of the magic piece. That's the funding piece, right? So for the guy who just wants to make 17%, don't use BenniFi. Just go to Rex and stake your EOS on Rex. It's not that easy to do, but go ahead and do it. That's fine. But what we do is because we use the pooling mechanism, so now we get a lot of guys who are willing to take a flyer on a project that's coming up, stake a portion of their EOS, to our pool. We aggregate it. We aggregate all that staking. Takes a bigger chunk. We drop it into the investment vehicle and earn the yield. The yield comes back. We distribute that yield however that pool defines that distribution. And again, it could be 100% to VeriPura. It could be 50% to VeriPura, and the other 50% goes out to some other interest they have, co-ops, or some of that yield could go back to the guy who put down the original stake, right? And then at the end of that period, we've got this aggregated stake. We decouple it and send it back along its way to the 100 people who dropped it into the pool. So that's kind of the community pooling aspect of it. But if you're just interested in the 17%, yeah, drop it in the network staking pool and do it that way. But if you want to get a Veri token back, you want to invest in a company or a project, then do it this way. Now, from a company structure standpoint, this is super interesting from the LLC's point of view, because now you're fundraising, but you're not diluting, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not losing ownership. You're not losing control of the company by having a big VC come in and say, okay, we're going to drop $1 million here, but now, we're going to own 51% of this thing, right? So you've got ownership. You're basically getting investment in ownership without the dilution, but it also gives, from the investor standpoint, it gives them an off ramp, right? So they don't have to wait. And traditionally, when you invest in a company, you've got to wait for that event that now you can make your money back on that. Some bigger guy comes in and buys it and buys out your spot, and now I've got my money back. I don't know. Probably, Jack, you're probably sitting on a lot of investments that are sitting there, stagnant, waiting for a bigger guy to come in and buy it so that you can get out of there, right?
But in this case, the VCs could just buy your Veri tokens, right?
VCs would buy the Veri tokens. That's it.
They could end up controlling your.
Yeah, but you set the DAO up to, the DAO is also programmed, right? So you got to be aware of that when you set your DAO up. But it's a structured program that controls that environment. So if it was just in the old days, it was token for token, right? The more tokens you had, once you hit a certain percent, you could control it. But people were taking advantage of that. A whale would come in and someone would buy all the damn tokens. I run the damn thing down, right? So there's mechanisms you can set up in place. You can democratize it. There's we introduced a litocracy aspect where you had a great term. No, actually, ancient word from ancient Greece. So you had you have a democracy where people are elected or owners of tokens who run the environment, but then you open up a certain portion of the governance to a randomly selected group from the community. So large token holders sit at the board, and then they sit across the table from these randomly selected people within the community to kind of offset that power balance. And so that makes sure that the community is really driving this and not some guy with a very, focused,
Right.
community interest.
I see people doing it there with yields from regular farms. So farmer has a contract, has a production deal. This is something we've talked about. That farmer has a contract at a fixed price to deliver soybeans, and they contract, before they plant, right? There's a company that go and they basically, transfer the outcome of that contract. This gets tokenized, they get money at a particular percentage yield, right?
Yeah. And you cut out the
They get their
middleman.
money up from.
It's more
Yep.
efficient to create to tokenize that and create them out. You cut out the middleman. Now you've got this contract in a box, right?
Yep.
So you can generate it, and you've got the payment mechanism built into it already. So,
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, what are the rules around unstaking? If somebody steps in and says, I want to support VeriPura today.
Yep.
Here's, 10 Bitcoins. And then tomorrow they say, I don't want to do that.
Right.
I want to move it over to here because I get, 3% more premium.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything is there any form of commitment in these, or are you just, hoping to get a big enough base that the people moving in and out don't really affect your operation?
Great question. So each chain and each contract can define what that looks like. So if I'm gonna go strictly to, I'll use EOS for example. I'm gonna go strictly to EOS and use their staking rules. Then I would stake. They do a soft release of the stake every 21 days. So you can get your stake back, or you get your yield back. They'll release that yield every 21 days, but the stake is locked in until you decide you're going to unlock it. And then there's a certain number of days because you don't want to be disruptive. So there's a pause period. Okay, I'm going to unstake. All right, you'll get your stake back in 15 days. All right. So you can, from BenniFi's perspective, we could have just adopted that the yield producers staking rules, but we recognize that that's a problem. So what we've built in is we call it the BenniFi exchange. So you can, if you are staked into a pool and you decide, I don't want to be staked here anymore, I want someone to come in. It's kind of primitive, but we'll add more features onto it. But people can come in and buy your place in line. So you can put your position in that pool up for sale at a discount and get your stake back. And the person who takes your spot gets in line and waits for the reward. So in VeriPura, if somebody came into a VeriPura pool and they were going to get Veri tokens, they were staked. They staked EOS and they said, you know what, I want to get out of this. I want to sell my position. Somebody can go and I know I'm getting EOS stake back. I got EOS yield a little bit coming back, and I got this VeriPura token, this Veri token coming in, and that whole thing is worth $1,000 in my mind. $1,000. I can ask for $900 to get out of that, and now I can retrieve my assets, but the yield mechanism is still working for VeriPura, right? It's just a new person the spot in line. So it's a safety valve that we put in place just to make sure people didn't get stuck. But it's great for the guy. Anybody can do that who's got a position, right? So it's not just the staker, it's the person, it's the person getting the distribution. So in this case, VeriPura could say, I got a pool, and these people are staking for a year, and we're gonna get $100,000 in yield at the end of this year, right? So in 12 months. But Tom's going, I got bills to pay. We got to do something now, right? So Tom can sell, or VeriPura can sell their position on that distribution at a discount. Okay, got $100,000 coming in. Let's just sell this thing for 95. Some investor's going to go in and go, that's an easy way to make a quick $5,000. I'll just take their position, wait it out for a year, and I get an extra $5,000.